She didn't call for help because she wanted to. She called because she thought she was going to die tonight. Christmas night. A woman is on the floor. Her nose is shattered. Her ribs are screaming. The man standing over her, the same man who shares a bed with her, the same man whose face is all over YouTube, has just told her with complete calm, "I will kill you." And she believed him. She reaches for a phone, not even her own phone, just trying to dial 3 numbers. 911. He takes it from her hands. That moment right there, that is where our story begins tonight. Before we go any further, I need to warn you. What you are about to hear tonight on Fatal Files is deeply disturbing. This case involves graphic descriptions of physical violence and domestic abuse. If that is something that affects you personally, please take care of yourself first. For everyone still with me, if this is your first time here, welcome to Fatal Files. Hit that subscribe button right now because this is the kind of content we bring you, raw, unfiltered, and unflinching. And drop a comment below. Where in the world are you watching Fatal Files from tonight? We want to know. Now let's get into it. To understand what happened in that hotel room on Christmas Eve, you first need to understand who Jonathan Lee Riches actually is. Not the version he built for YouTube. The documented one. He was born around 1977 and grew up in Pennsylvania before settling in Holiday, Florida. In his mid-20s, he orchestrated a phishing scheme that targeted thousands of AOL subscribers. He and his accomplices, including a teenager named Jason Carpenter recruited through online chat rooms, sent fraudulent emails designed to look legitimate, harvested the personal data of people who responded, and used that data to open credit cards in their names. The purchases were not modest. 66 shirts, Gucci bracelets, gold hoop earrings, computer equipment, over 2,000 victim accounts, more than $1.4 million in fraudulent charges. In February 2003, federal agents arrested him in Florida alongside 7 accomplices, including his own parents. He was brought to Texas to face charges of wire fraud, conspiracy, money laundering, computer hacking, and using false identities. The sentence was 125 months for wire fraud, 60 months for conspiracy, served concurrently, plus $92,680 in restitution. He did not slow down in prison. He filed over 2,600 lawsuits from his cell, targeting virtually every federal district in the country with claims so outlandish that the Guinness Book of World Records named him the most litigious individual in history. He sued them to have the listing removed. He was released on April 30, 2012. 3 days after the Sandy Hook shooting, he drove to Newtown, Connecticut, without permission from his probation officer, and impersonated Adam Lanza's uncle at a public memorial. Multiple news outlets published his fabricated claims before the hoax was identified. He was arrested again for violating probation. By 2019 he was telling the Huffington Post openly that he could plant false information about a mass shooting suspect before the real shooter was even identified, and that vulnerable, gullible people would spread it without question. Then came the political chapter. At a Trump rally in Jersey Shore, Wildwood, New Jersey, he declared 100% support for Donald Trump on camera. Separately, he showed up at Hillary Clinton's campaign headquarters in Westchester, Pennsylvania, operating under a group called Muslims for Clinton, declaring 100% support for Hillary Clinton. He later wrote that the Clintons were easy to troll. He also presented himself as Jews for Trump at a separate event, and admitted it was fabricated when confronted. Every single identity he has ever worn was a performance built for a specific audience. The fearless investigator was no different. After his final release, he rebranded as JLR Investigates on YouTube. By early 2026, the channel had over 548,000 subscribers. His notoriety accelerated through coverage of the Summerwell's disappearance, where he showed up on scene and filmed people without their consent. More recently, he was broadcasting daily from outside the home connected to the Nancy Guthrie case in Tucson, Arizona, sometimes streaming for 15 hours straight, collecting viewer donations in real time. Fellow true crime streamer Alina Smith told the New York Post he had become a genuine celebrity in the true crime community. Other streamers estimated his weekly earnings at up to $30,000. 500,000 people. $30,000 a week. Built on a brand of seeking justice. If you are not yet subscribed to Fatal Files, this is the standard we hold every case to. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss one. Now we turn to the woman at the center of this case. Her name is Jaime Tennille Phillips. Online she goes by Magnolia and runs a channel called Magnolia Investigates. She met Jonathan Lee Riches through the true crime community and says she believed he was a man who had genuinely turned his life around after prison. She claims she was actively involved in helping him grow. JLR investigates into the platform it became. But this documentary gives you the full picture on every person it covers. And the full picture on Jaime Tennille Phillips includes her own documented controversy. In 2017, Phillips was accused of fabricating a story claiming she had been impregnated by Alabama Senate candidate Roy Moore when she was a teenager. She attempted to place that story with the Washington Post. The Post investigated, found the account to be false, and did not publish it. Phillips was later connected to Project Veritas, the organization run by James O'Keefe and known for conducting undercover media stings designed to expose perceived bias in mainstream newsrooms. That history matters. Both individuals in this case carry documented records of deception. Fatal Files is not asking you to take either person's word for anything. This case rests on a sworn court affidavit, a law enforcement incident report, medical documentation, and a court-issued protective order. Those are the sources. With that established, her own words to the New York Post were these. She said she was duped for a long time, that he portrayed himself as changed but that was never real, and that he is the same person he has always been. She also told the Post that the only thing Jonathan Lee Riches genuinely cares about is money, and that the cases were never the point. Follow the evidence. That is all this chapter asks. The relationship between Jonathan Lee Riches and Jaime Tennille Phillips began in early 2023. Phillips says she was not just his partner during this period, she was a working part of the operation. She helped shape the content, contributed to the channel's growth, and was visible enough to the audience that JLR viewers knew who Magnolia was. On the outside, it looked like two people in the true crime community building something together. The court filing describes what was allegedly happening on the inside as a persistent and escalating pattern of domestic abuse, coercive control, intimidation, financial exploitation, and physical violence. It is worth pausing on the term coercive control because it is frequently misunderstood. Coercive control is not a single incident. It is a system. It is the deliberate, repeated use of tactics, financial restriction, isolation, surveillance, threats, and intermittent punishment, designed to erode a person's independence until leaving feels impossible or more dangerous than staying. Researchers and law enforcement professionals who study domestic violence consistently identify coercive control as one of the most accurate predictors of escalating physical danger in a relationship. It does not announce itself. It builds quietly, and by the time the physical violence becomes visible, the psychological architecture that makes escape difficult is already fully in place. According to Phillips, Riches used finances as one of those tools throughout their time together. She alleges he controlled access to money in ways that kept her dependent and limited her options. Meanwhile, publicly, Magnolia was a recognizable face to his audience. She appeared on streams. Viewers commented on her. She was part of the brand. That public visibility is worth noting, because coercive control often operates most effectively when the outside world sees nothing wrong. Then came August 2025. The two were on a work trip in Charlotte, North Carolina. Phillips says she found evidence of infidelity on his work phone and confronted him directly. According to the court filing, Riches responded with violence. He allegedly attacked her in the hotel room, strangled her approximately 24 times, and told her he would kill her if she contacted authorities. When it was over, he took the rental car and drove himself back to Florida. He left her alone in Charlotte. What happened on Christmas Eve 2025 was not a sudden change in behavior. According to the documented record, it was the continuation of a pattern that had already been running for nearly 3 years. December 24, 2025. Leavenworth, Washington State. Chelan County. Phillips and Riches were staying at a hotel in a town most people associate with Christmas markets and winter tourism. What happened inside that hotel room that night is documented in a handwritten affidavit that Phillips later filed with a court in Arkansas. According to that affidavit, the injuries she sustained included a broken nose and septum, significant trauma to her head, and damage to her ribs. The medical response required emergency care, CT scans, X-rays, and physicians later determined she would need reconstructive surgery. When she attempted to call for help during the incident, Riches took her phone away from her. He then left the hotel, got into their rented white Jeep Compass and crossed state lines. He was gone before law enforcement arrived. The only phone left in that room was his work phone. The same device she had found the infidelity evidence on months earlier in Charlotte. That detail is in the record. Chelan County Sheriff's Office deputies responded to the scene. The injuries they observed were documented and found to be consistent with Phillips' account. Medical personnel were present. The responding officers gathered evidence and assessed the situation thoroughly enough to establish probable cause for second-degree domestic violence assault. But Riches had already left Washington state. That distinction matters legally. When a domestic violence suspect crosses state lines before an arrest is made, the process of holding them accountable becomes significantly more complex. Law enforcement in the originating state must pursue extradition, which requires coordination between jurisdictions, a formal arrest warrant, and in many cases a determination of whether the charges meet the threshold required to compel another state to act. It does not make accountability impossible. It makes it slower and harder. Phillips has also stated that the abuse did not stop after Christmas. She alleges that harassment, threats, and financial control continued into 2026, even after he had left the state and she had been treated for her injuries. The incident in Leavenworth was where the paper trail became unavoidable. And that paper trail is what the next chapter is built on entirely. When the Chelan County Sheriff's Office responded to that hotel on Christmas Eve, they did not leave empty-handed. What their deputies observed, documented, and submitted became the foundation of the law enforcement record in this case. The incident report captured the injuries visible on Phillips at the scene. Officers noted the physical findings, recorded their observations in detail, assessed the consistency between what she told them and what they could see, and concluded that the evidence supported probable cause for second-degree domestic violence assault. That finding was significant. Probable cause is not a low bar. It means law enforcement reviewed the available evidence and determined there was sufficient reason to believe a crime had been committed and that Jonathan Lee Riches had committed it. The Chelan County Sheriff's Office later confirmed that probable cause finding directly to the New York Post. The documentation existed. The legal basis for an arrest existed. The problem was that Riches was no longer in Washington state. Under the current framework for domestic violence enforcement across state lines, the originating jurisdiction, in this case Chelan County, cannot simply reach across a border and make an arrest. What is required is a formal warrant, a process of interstate coordination, and a determination of whether the charge level meets the threshold that obligates another state to participate in extradition. Second-degree assault charges can qualify, but the process is neither automatic nor fast. It requires deliberate legal action from prosecutors, and it depends on where the suspect is located and whether that location can be confirmed. As of the filming of this documentary, no publicly confirmed arrest warrant has been issued and no formal criminal charges have been filed against Jonathan Lee Riches in connection with the Christmas Eve 2025 incident. That gap between probable cause and prosecution is one of the most significant structural failures visible in this case, and it is not unique to this one. It is a pattern that advocates for domestic violence reform have documented repeatedly. Phillips did not wait for the criminal system to move. She pursued a parallel legal path. She filed a sworn petition for an order of protection in Arkansas, attaching a handwritten affidavit that laid out the documented history of abuse, the August 2025 incident in Charlotte, the Christmas Eve assault in Leavenworth, and the alleged continuation of harassment and financial abuse into 2026. On January 21, 2026, an Arkansas court issued the order of protection. The court's finding was specific. It determined that Phillips faced an immediate and present danger of domestic abuse. That is the legal language used in the order, and it carries legal weight. A judge reviewed a sworn affidavit, assessed the evidence presented, and made a formal judicial determination that the danger was real, present, and serious enough to warrant court intervention. The protective order runs for 3 years. Jonathan Lee Riches has not made any public statement in response to these proceedings. His attorney did not return requests for comment from the New York Post. The channel has remained active throughout. These cases only move forward when people refuse to look away from them. Share this documentary. And if you are not yet subscribed to Fatal Files, this is exactly the standard we bring to every case we cover. Subscribe now and stay with us. There is a specific reason Jonathan Lee Riches built his audience around true crime and not some other content category. Victims are credible. Caring about victims transfers that credibility to whoever appears to champion them. If you stand at a crime scene and demand answers loudly enough, a significant portion of the audience will assume you are one of the good ones. He covered the Summer Wells disappearance. He covered the Nancy Guthrie case in Tucson. He inserted himself into dozens of active investigations, positioning himself consistently as someone whose presence at these scenes was motivated by justice. His audience of over 500,000 people largely accepted that framing. According to a court-issued protective order and the sworn affidavit that preceded it, the woman who sat beside him on those streams, who helped build that channel from the ground up, and who was publicly known to his entire audience, was allegedly living as one of those victims the entire time. That is not an editorial opinion. That is what the legal record reflects. Look at the full arc of his documented history and a pattern becomes visible that goes well beyond the YouTube channel. There was the AOL phishing scheme that targeted over 2,000 people. There were the jailhouse lawsuits filed against virtually every institution he could name. There was the Sandy Hook impersonation. There was the Trump rally in New Jersey and the Clinton headquarters in Pennsylvania, both performed with complete conviction for whichever audience was in front of him at the time. Jews for Trump. Muslims for Clinton. Each identity worn with total commitment until it had served its purpose, then discarded. The fearless investigator was the same construction. It was the identity that worked for this particular audience at this particular moment. And according to Jaime Tennille Phillips, the financial returns made it worth maintaining carefully. If the earnings estimates reported by fellow streamers are accurate, up to $30,000 per week, then the platform was not just a hobby or a passion project. It was a highly profitable business. Phillips told the New York Post that the only thing Jonathan Lee Riches genuinely cares about is money and that the cases themselves were never the real point. Placed against those earnings figures, that statement reads less like bitterness and more like a financial analysis. The parallel with Wes Watson is worth acknowledging directly. Watson is another YouTube personality with a prison background who built a large following and faced documented domestic violence allegations while that audience remained largely unaware. Two creators. Same lane. Same background. Same pattern of allegations emerging while the public persona remained intact. That is not a coincidence worth dismissing. The question the true crime community has been forced to sit with since this story became public is a direct one. What does accountability actually look like when the person accused of the crime is the same person the community has been trusting to cover crimes? The audience that funded this platform through donations, memberships, and watch time deserves an honest answer to that question. And the answer begins with refusing to look away from the documented record simply because the name attached to it is familiar. Here is where this case stands as of March 2026. Jaime Tennille Phillips has a court-issued protective order, granted on January 21, 2026, running for 3 years. The Chelan County Sheriff's Office has a documented probable cause finding on record. Riches had already left Washington state before any arrest could be made. Jonathan Lee Riches has not been formally charged. No arrest warrant has been publicly confirmed. Neither he nor his attorney has made any public statement in response to the allegations or the court proceedings. His YouTube channel, JLR Investigates, remains active. This case is not closed. The legal process is still moving. Fatal Files will continue to track every development as it happens and report back to this community with verified information only. What this case illustrates, more than anything else, is how coercive control operates in plain sight. It does not look like what most people imagine abuse looks like. It looks like a couple building something together. It looks like shared streams and public appearances and a relationship that seems functional from the outside. The violence, when it comes, is the final visible stage of a process that began long before anyone outside that relationship could see it. That is why coercive control remains one of the most underreported and legally underaddressed forms of domestic abuse. By the time law enforcement becomes involved, the pattern has usually been running for months or years. The Charlotte incident in August 2025 was not the beginning. According to the court filing, the beginning was somewhere in 2023. Christmas Eve 2025 was simply the moment the documentation caught up to the reality. There are practical things this case teaches about how the legal system responds to domestic violence. A protective order is not a criminal conviction. It is a civil court finding, but it carries legal force. Violating it is a criminal act. The process Phillips used in Arkansas, filing a sworn petition supported by a detailed affidavit, is available to survivors in every state, and it does not require a criminal charge to already be in place. Law enforcement documentation, medical records, and a consistent account are what courts assess. In this case, all three were present. Probable cause, as established by the Chelan County Sheriff's Office, means the evidentiary bar for an arrest had been met. The gap between that finding and a formal charge is a systemic one, not a reflection of whether the evidence was credible. Both Jonathan Lee Riches and Jaime Tennille Phillips carry complicated personal histories. This documentary has not asked you to ignore that on either side. What it has asked you to follow is the documented record, the incident report, the medical findings, the sworn affidavit, and the court order. Those are not opinions. They are legal and evidentiary standards that were applied by trained professionals and a sitting judge. If anything in this case resonates with your own situation or someone you know, the National Domestic Violence Hotline is available around the clock. The number is 1-800-799-7233. You can also reach them by texting START to 88788. Help is real and it is there. Fatal Files exists because these cases deserve more than a headline and a few days of attention before the news cycle moves on. If this documentary gave you something, a clearer picture of this case, a better understanding of how coercive control works, or simply information you did not have before, share it with someone who needs to see it. Subscribe if you are not already part of this community. And tell us in the comments what case you want us to cover next. We read every single one. I am your host. This has been Fatal Files. And we will keep filing.